I am unashamed. What about you?
I had something profound happen yesterday, but I have no proof.
Well, it might not be so profound.
It may be a figment of your imagination.
Well, Missy's she went out of town. She's tying up some loose ends here and
By
there.
the way, Miss Kay said under no circumstances ever would she turn down blackened crappie. She said, I don't care what anybody said. Don't stick blackened crappie in front of me because I want some of that.
Well, I told Missy I told that story because then I thought, how's she going to feel about that? Evidently not too well. She said, now people are going to think I'm some weirdo. She's like, I made a commitment.
I put a positive spin that
she's like, I made a commitment not to do that. And I mean, it was kind of, between her and God. She does these things. That's how she operates.
This blackened crappie got in the way of her diet, basically, is what
she's not on a diet. She's just sometimes
fasting from meat.
Yeah, sometimes she'll just eat vegetables for 3 days, or she does that kind of stuff. The problem was I don't keep up with all this. How would I know that?
Yeah, I was right about it. I knew the problem was going to be that she told you this 3 days ago.
Oh yeah, of course.
And she was upset because you didn't remember.
I mean, look, I can't remember hardly anything. So anyway, I got through that. So, when she's gone,
there's a rock group that's called Moody Blues. Moody Blues.
Now, this is nothing about being moody. This was just me getting it wrong. So I'm back over at Willie's, and because I'm looking for some more crappie. Now I'm mad that I blackened them because I did them for her. So I'm fixed to fry some.
You were forced to eat them all.
Yeah. So this is like next day I'm back over there, because they only bite right there before dark. So I had some guests a week ago. I think I told you all about it, where I was trying to get them to catch a big bass over there. Of course, when you try to do something, it becomes almost impossible.
That's right. Yeah.
So I got this little, this it looks like a kid's rod and reel. It's a little bitty short thing, open face, with the kind you like. What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, with the bell, you click over. So what I have on there is I have a little bitty jig, and I have right above it 6 inches a little weight, and then about 2 foot above that I have a cork, because I wasn't catching anything until I started suspending that little grub jig.
Yep.
And so when we were trying to catch the big bass, I was using an H&H, and I got hung on a top out in the middle, and I thought, somebody's put a top out there, because there wasn't a top there before. It's this Jay Stone move here. Put the secret top out in a stock pond.
Don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody, but I found it. So
there's a lot of secrets going on around the pond. Have you noticed that? Yeah. A lot of people not sharing information.
We're calling the pond.
He's not fixated on the crappie and Willie's pond, but he's close.
Bill, I have an addiction. Let's have this intervention. I am addicted to eating fresh crappie. I can't help it. The temptation is too great.
I would think it's one of the perfect diets. They're baked. They're grilled fish.
Yeah.
Jesus loved fish. That's enough for me right there.
Well, right.
His last
first meal he ordered post-resurrection was give me some fish.
Last one he had on the planet.
Look, when he picked these men, we're fixed to get into Matthew. Welcome to the Matthew debut. One of the famous lines is, "You come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." But these were fishermen.
I've been there and done that.
So anyway, so I go out. So I thought since I have a rod and reel, not a jig pole. I said, I want to try out there where I got hung. So that's the first thing I did, because I got my little honey hole that I won't give the details in case anybody's listening to this who has access to that.
Protect the hole.
Which is doubtful.
So I flipped this thing. It's about as far as I could throw to get it out there. Well, a couple of times I saw my cork move just a little bit. I thought it was almost like a turtle was messing with it. But they wouldn't just take it. I was like, what is that? So I kept, I become obsessed with, because I could tell something was messing with it because I was seeing that cord. And this went on for about 10 minutes. Well, finally, that cord it kind of stood straight up and just started easing down. I said, well, here we go. So I just set back the hook, and I thought, whatever this is not edible, too big, because it was just dead raw weight. Yeah, dead weight. And so the fight ensued. Now, once this thing got closer, it started making runs and pulling drags. So I was like, it's not a turtle, because I mean, well, the announcement I have for you, I don't know what this thing weighed, because I landed the fish. I risk my life because I was up on the bridge and I had to stair step down the rocks because way too big. It was a bass, largemouth bass, but it was the biggest bass I've ever caught in my life. And I've caught some hefty bass. I mean, the biggest one off the top of my head probably was in a tournament. We got a lake down here.
Did you know
Lake. It was 9 pounds and 10 ounces. So, but this one was bigger.
Did you not have your phone to take a...
I didn't have my phone. Well, because I'm like, I fooled around and land this thing after, I don't know how long the fight was, but I had to stair step down these rocks down the bridge. Well, I looked, I jumped, and I thought this grass was like a foot high around Willie's pond. It's 4 foot high. So when I jumped into the grass, I just disappeared. Yeah, I'm in the water. I'm like, you kidding me? And so I get this bass up there. I mean, he's like, okay, I'm done. He wore out. So I grabbed him. And by the way, I mean, that little jig was in his mouth. I could stick my fist, all the way in, and I could move it. I could have stuck 2 of them in there. This thing was humongous. So what I found fascinating, though, is because I reached down to get my phone. No, I don't have my phone. And I'm like, well, what do you do with this thing? Nothing. So I had him in the edge of the grass, got the bait out, and I just laid him there. He's quite the sight. Well, I got up the rock. I started crappie fishing. That joker laid there. He was in the water, but just like...
He was just resting.
Resting for 10 minutes. I'd look over there at him. I was like, I wonder if did he die? And I thought, well, if somebody will come by here with a phone, I'll take a picture of him. This ought to be fun, but nobody did. But finally, after about 10 minutes, I heard, whoo, and I looked up. He
came back to life.
Himself and took off. And I was like, well, since I have no proof of that, I need to tell that story.
Well, BK caught one in there that looked like he was over 10, but Jay got a picture, but maybe that same fish because,
might have been.
Everybody's, nobody, what are you going to do with a big old bass?
Well, they've got it down. Jace keeps talking about we finally caught them all, but they keep catching them. So
the bass,
it's hard to catch. It's hard to catch them all.
I hadn't saying you catch them all. That's what these fools are saying. It's just no longer that easy, as in you just throw anywhere with any contraption at any time and catch them. At first, when they first stocked that thing, because they're all the neighbors. Well, now you're down to the seasoned veterans down there, and you can catch them. Just got to know what you're doing.
Because they're the ones that don't breed, right? I mean,
no. They said that, but they're breeding. I'm catching small crappie, medium crappie, and large crappie.
Oh yeah,
you got too many crappie in there. I'm just hammering them.
So they giving up on it because they don't think they're there. You got the best gig in town.
Oh well, my neighbor. Yeah. That's Willie's wife. When I'm walking back, he's like, what you got there? But it's dark. I said, supper. And he said, you got any crappie there? I said, boy, it's slow. The bass are really hitting. I was like, diversion. He said crappie. He's like, well, I hadn't fished down there in a while. Somebody said they caught all the crappie out of there. I was like, you never know. These people, they're hammering it.
You sound like somebody did a congressional investigation.
Trying not to lie, but I was
far as I can recall, as far as I remember,
I was like, well, I mean, it's too hot to fish. Really. I think it's too hot. Anyway, I was planting the seed. Don't go out there. It's hot.
Stay away. I love it.
So anyway, look, been here over 50 years. You catch something that's the biggest you've ever caught. I thought that was worthy of an announcement.
Yeah, it's just like
it meant very little to me.
It was just like in Jaws when he came in and said, "Oh, we know it's a great white because we had the tooth." He said, "You got the tooth? Let me see the tooth." He said, well, "I dropped it." He was like, "Okay, sure." Really? So I want to mention before we get into Matthew, our brother-in-law Tony Thomas was just here. We love Tony. He's quite the artiste. He's got a new thing he's going to show everybody, a couple of new paintings. And so he's going to do a Facebook Live, and I'm going to join him just so it'll be interesting. And it's going to be on Saturday, September 4th, 7 p.m. Central, so wherever you are across the country. So 7 p.m. It's on Facebook and Instagram Live. So look for that on Tony's, I guess it'll be on his page or whatever. So we're going to unveil some new stuff that he's doing, so it should be fun. So we're in Matthew. Oh wait, before we get into that, Jace, I meant to mention this yesterday. I wanted to show it so you can see it. On one of the church buildings coming out here, this was on their sign. It says, "Paul, please come to Damascus," which I thought was interesting.
I think they're talking about Paul, the biblical writer,
right? So instead of Damascus, they said Damascus, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. Kind of a preacher joke, but
they're tired of their mess.
They're tired of their
mess. I think maybe you had a city named Damascus.
Don't overthink it, Jay.
No, I'm saying.
I know. I get it.
This is the joke. Look, the first thing I would do if I was put in charge of the religious organizations is we need to. What are these things called where they put these messages?
Yeah, it's just their sign. I mean,
yeah, whatever that is, we need to do away with that.
Yeah, because they're always trying these little puns.
It's cheap. It is the most cheesy, and I don't know why I read them. I get so frustrated. See, like this.
Yeah.
This
it was still there today. I saw it yesterday and today. So some guy, he's proud of himself.
This is disturbing to me.
Well, it got my attention, so I thought it was worthy of note.
Here's what I think we should do. If we were put in charge of the signs, you just put a name and definition of God or Jesus on your sign.
Well, some
we're going to get into that with Matthew,
right?
So put what is the meaning of Jesus,
or a text, right? I mean,
well, Jesus, though, I'm saying is the Greek. What is it, Joshua? I think so. Greek Joshua, and it means the Lord saves. So just put on your sign, the Lord saves.
See, here's one. So I just looked it up. I just put
not following it.
Church signs. Social distancing does not apply to God. Draw near to Him.
See, it's not that I don't agree with them. It's too cheesy. Just put the Lord saves. So put Emmanuel. Y'all know what that means?
Yeah.
God is with us.
God is with us.
Just make declarations of who God is, not cheesy political / religious connections. Quit looking at those signs and let's move on.
Adam and Eve, the first people who did not read the Apple terms and conditions.
See, this is not good to me. This is what's wrong. This is why people won't meet in church building.
So you're saying the signs are not helping is what you're saying?
No, they're not helping. If I was not in Jesus and that's your attempt at marketing, I'm out.
Good.
I'm out.
Yeah, we don't put anything on ours.
That's not appealing to me.
Let's take a break. So one of my favorite sponsors of our podcast is a group called Faithful Counseling, because I am very big on counseling. Not only has it helped Lisa and I, but we've done a lot of it ourselves. I mean, we're kind of I would call us redneck counselors. You know, we don't have any official training other than the Bible, which is all you need to help people.
And the counselor, capital C.
There you go.
Came out of the school of hard knocks.
Hard knocks. As I always tell our counselors, usually things don't do this, and you'll be better off. But these guys are trained. And of course, there's a faith element as well, which is important when you're talking about counseling as a Christian. Anything you share with these guys is confidential. They have 3,000 U.S. licensed therapists across all 50 states, which is great. It's available worldwide, text, chat, phone, video. There's a lot of different ways to be able to do this, and it's affordable. So what you want to do if you need some counseling or know someone that does, you can guide them to faithfulcounseling.com/unashamed. You're going to get 10% off your first month by being an Unashamed listener. So that's faithfulcounseling.com/unashamed. You're going to fill out a questionnaire. They're going to assess your needs, and they're going to match you with a counselor that you'll love. So check them out, faithfulcounseling.com/unashamed. All right, so the book of Matthew, it's listed as the first one. Not that matters. It could have been anywhere in the line. In fact, most scholars agree that Mark is actually the first one written because Matthew pulls some things from Mark. So
now who comes up with this stuff?
Oh, you got people that have studied this for thousands of years.
I've always thought Matthew was the first one.
It's the first one in order. The reason why most people think there's a lot of debate about it, but the most reason people think it is because it's the most Jewish. So, Dad, you made the point that when you get to the end of Malachi, back in Daniel, you're looking forward. There was a period where we didn't really.
Does this really matter, though?
Well, no. Yeah. Doesn't. But I mean, it's interesting to some people that it is the most Jewish of all the four.
So, what do you mean by it's the most Jewish?
Well, it mentions the most about prophecy. 60 Old Testament references of prophecies.
It begins with the seed line. The Jewish seed line.
Correct. The royal.
Now, everybody's got to remember that doesn't cover, because when you say, well, I can date all of this. Well, Matt Owens and myself, we looked into this pretty strongly. We tried our best to add up all the lineages. He begins with Abraham. Matthew 1, verse 2, a record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. But now you have all these generations before them that start with when God created Adam, Seth. So you have Seth. Matthew doesn't cover that. But you have Seth over here. He's going all the way to Noah. It's just one genealogy after the other one. That's in Genesis 5. Noah lived. Noah was 500 years old. Well, then you got to remember all the generations up to that point came to naught because God drowned them all, but 8. Right. Well, all those generations, they're gone. We were just trying to figure out how many years there was from Genesis to Matthew. We ended up with an educated guess, and we got it at about 5,000 years, give or take a little, 5,300 or so.
And that's
add the 2021 to that.
but they live longer.
Well, that's right. It's a difficult undertaking because
that's right.
You think about a generation, even in our.
But it gives some number of years that most of them lived. Together, Lamech lived 777 years, and then he died. Noah was 500 years. It gives them, when they die, you can form a pretty good pattern
it's a guess
on the age of the earth by looking at this. So I'm just throwing that in. I'm not a theologian.
Right.
But we got it at about, from Genesis, the creation, to Jesus, roughly 5,000, 5,300. There's a lot of people that study this way more in depth, professors who were converted to Christianity because of the very thing we're talking about. And they've got it as a young earth, which I believe that to be true. So,
and I'm more of an
just some thoughts.
We keep coming up with this argument, but he could have made the earth old.
Correct.
Already
That's
old.
correct.
What's the big problem with that?
It's not
a problem.
And we won't know till we get.
I'm just telling you my opinion.
It doesn't really bother
me.
Right. Why is this information that I need to know?
Because it floats around from all circles that it's millions of years old. But you
that doesn't bother me, because he could have made it millions of years old.
He could have
in the beginning.
Or he could have made it through process.
Because it takes.
It's just some people that are Christians who are also scientists. they believe it was a process. Yep. You know, it's like when I went and visited the Ark, which is up in Kentucky, and it's amazing. But then they got a cage over there with some dinosaurs in it, and I was like, I just can't buy that. The dinosaurs weren't around the same time people were. There's no way. He could have made them where it was like there were dinosaurs there, but dinosaurs running around. You don't have a couple of T-Rexes on your Ark because for long, there ain't nobody going to be left. By the time we get to where we're going, they've eaten everybody.
So they had some dinosaurs?
Yeah, in the cage. I was like,
well, they think the dinosaurs...
Yeah, they came on with everything else, I guess.
But I'm saying they must think they died in the flood or whatever.
I guess so.
Yeah, a lot of people say when it says in the beginning,
and that's just somebody,
and the Spirit was hovering over the waters, they insert it there. That could have been millions of years to kind of agree with the scientists on the Earth is 13 point, cosmos is 13.5 billion. Well, you may be right.
It could be.
But I beg to differ. I don't believe that. But
right. And it's a studied opinion all the way.
Well, that
will never really solve.
In the order of important things, number one being Jesus introduced to the world. This is way down the list, in my opinion.
Now you'll get all kind of people sending you. We'll get a lot of people sending us what they think about the age of the Earth. Well, I've got it about
way down the list of important things that
we got into it back early when we talked about Genesis. But Jase, to answer your question about the genealogy here, it was important enough for Matthew that he included it.
That's my point.
And I think the reason why he did it, so the reason why is the clue is in 17, because it's really interesting. There were 14 generations. Why did he start at Abraham? 14 generations.
I was going to
from Abraham to David, and then 14 from David to the exile, which is where Daniel shows up, and then you got 14 after that. So there's a pattern here.
That's right.
Which means what?
Which to me means that the main focus of the genealogy was first Abraham, because God made a covenant with Abraham that would apply to all people. He said, you will be the father of all nations. I mean, everybody's going to come out.
Matthew's giving you the source of Jesus Christ.
Exactly. And then he goes to David, and the reason the covenant with David is important is he said, it is an everlasting royal kingdom that will come through your lineage. And so that's the reason I think he mentions those two. And now we get to Jesus. So the three central figures, and you could include Moses, but Matthew says it's Abraham, it's David, it's Jesus. Yep. That shows you what God had planned the whole time. That's why he starts it.
I agree. It shows that it was a plan, but two, now this is interesting. It's actually the seed line to Joseph.
Joseph, correct.
Well,
who was not his father.
That's my point.
Right. So
do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I do. So I think the reason why that is because Jesus had to have everything right. So for him to be, even though he wasn't Joseph's son, he had to be a legal heir of the kingdom. And that's why it was done this way. When you go over to Luke 3, he goes all the way back to Adam there.
Yep.
And
I thought Luke was Mary's.
It is. Although she's not mentioned. It mentions Joseph again, but here's how you know the two. So when you get to David, there's a fork for these two genealogies. One goes through one son, one through another son.
Forks are good in genealogy.
That's exactly right. So one was from the seed line of David, going all the way back, and one was the seed line going back just on the royal side.
That's what I wanted you to make, the point to make.
So I think that was the purpose of both genealogies, and I think, to answer your question, Jess, the reason Matthew is doing this from a Jewish perspective is that's who he's going to speak to. Most people think he wrote this in Hebrew.
And here's the whole point of the whole thing. Any way you slice it, I've heard it both ways, argument about our heritage from start to finish is Jewish.
That's right.
We owe, as Gentiles, we owe our salvation to Jesus.
Right.
And all the way back, and the father of our faith is Abraham. He's the first time called the Hebrew, Abram the Hebrew. That's the first time you read about the group known as Hebrews.
Right.
So way back in Genesis. So you look at it.
And what's interesting is Abraham even predates, what we think of as what happened in the desert that created the people of God. Actually, that was way back then.
That's right.
Before even that, which, that's where you got the promises. So that's kind of the importance of it.
Plus, the Jews, they should have heard this. Matthew showed them. Yeah. It's all Jewish.
Right. And so what's interesting, though, Jase, let's talk a little bit about Matthew the man. out of all the people, out of the 12, the guy who you would think would have the least, what would you call it? Skill set, maybe not skill set, but the least credibility.
Yeah.
Because he was an outcast. I mean, the man was a tax collector, which for his day was like the worst of the worst.
This day, the IRS is not spoken of too highly.
No, none of us like the tax man.
Well, I have a.
All right, have it up.
Next segment of my.
Hang on, let's take a break because this is big. So this summer, Jase, Bespoke Post, one of our sponsors, is here to take your adventures to the next level.
Oh, wow.
With a box of awesome. That's what their boxofawesome.com. I love their website. They partner with small businesses and emerging brands to basically bring you unique things every month. It's kind of like a little surprise box. I love getting mine. And it's anything from travel, outdoor gear, summer stuff, grooming, if you like to, you like to barbecue and grill, there's a lot of stuff like that. So to get started, you go to boxofawesome.com and you're going to take a quiz, and that way they're going to find out what you like, the kind of stuff you like. Then every month you're going to get a box full of awesome things. It's free sign up. You can skip a month. You can cancel anytime. Each box costs $45, but it has over $70 worth of gear. So you're making a little bit of money every time you get the stuff. You get 20% off your first monthly box when you sign up at boxofawesome.com and you enter the code PHIL at checkout. That's boxofawesome.com, code PHIL, 20% off your first box. Jase's segment.
This is a segment. So he was named Levi also, which is common. I mean, this is my theory, because if you read, what is that, Mark 2, it's like 13, I think. So they were calling him Levi, so at some point he's Matthew. But a lot of people had a name change when they encountered Jesus or put their faith in God.
Right.
So here's my So Levi, which is basically, when you think of Levi, I mean, what pops in your head? Some kind of
the tribe, the priestly tribe.
Jew, kind of rule-oriented, ritualistic faith or whatever. So his new name is Matthew, which is the definition of Matthew is the gift of God.
Gift of God.
So I got to thinking about it. In, I think, all cultures, gifts are not taxable. If you get a gift, now I think they put a cap on it now. This is why I said it's with someone, well, what I'm saying is if you're a tax
there is a
guy,
cap. There's a cap. It's $15,000. That's what it is right now.
But I'm saying the general principle deeper than that, which is, he's a tax collector. Outcast, I don't think is strong enough word, because they were. I mean, can you imagine?
Well, and his
fellow disciples, it's worthy of note, were illiterates.
Yeah, he was probably the only.
They didn't even go to kindergarten, junior high, high school. These people were not educated at all.
That's right.
So if you take a bunch and all of a sudden you look up and you say, who is that? And you say, well, I don't know. Jesus told them to follow him, and he's one of us. It would have had to been a giant chasm to cross for Matthew to walk up among them. Now, and the chosen, when they brought it up, they had him pictured as kind of a freaky bean counter, with
autism,
kind of on the scale, Asperger's scale.
Yeah, and look, I don't know. I think it was interesting. I mean, I think they get that idea, because I thought, well, where in the world?
Well, and what he does is, there's a thing you can Google him, the actor talking about it. When he's talking, he's always, he's like counting on his fingers.
Oh yeah.
He's always got these little ticks, but I thought it was brilliant, because he was the most.
He was a financial wizard type.
Right, exactly.
Well, but he's got social issues.
I've seen a few of them. I run from them,
Yeah. He's got social.
Matthew, I've got to embrace him as a brother. So I'm thinking, boy, who you with? I'm with the IRS. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, you just got to think, they're hated. And I think if you read, his calling, let me read the Mark 2 and I'll give you my thoughts on why I think they did that. This is Mark 2:13. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him. And Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, he keeps saying that over and over. They asked the disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." So in Matthew 9, which he has the same story, but now it's Matthew, so I guess he's writing about himself. Well, why wait 9 chapters?
And why use Matthew instead of Levi?
Well, that's why I said, because I think that Matthew, meaning the gift of God, was some kind of message to him about who God is and what he was doing. I think he was in a world where if you're smart enough and you're getting paid and you're in with the right people, you can be, successful.
Right.
You're a government official, which was a monarchy, which was a monarchy, and he was one of the boys.
Well, that's right.
Because he's the one fleecing the people out of their money.
And most tax collectors, the reason they were so hated, not only were they representing taking money for the Romans and the Jews, by the way, Herod, they were getting...
Our country has taken what the Romans did and extended that even
on
more.
Steroids.
Oh, yeah.
But at least we don't have another country coming in taking taxes and them people working for those. That would be worse, is what I'm saying. And that's what was going on here.
Yeah, because they were occupied. And most tax collectors would shave off money for themselves. You remember when Zacchaeus, his story, he was like, when he finally got it with Jesus, he was like, "I've been fleecing people, and I'm going to give back 4 times what I stole."
Yep.
Because he had a moment. He was like, but that gave you an insight into it. Now, Matthew, it never says he was skimming, but he was, because they all did. It's how they made money.
Well, I just think it's significant that the name got changed to Matthew, which means the gift of God. I just think there's something there.
Well, one guy I read, he noticed it too. And what he said, because there's another thing in here, I think I wrote it down in the notes, but that one of them calls him in one of the descriptions as a son of Alphaeus.
Yeah, it says that in.
And then there's another disciple, James, the son of Alphaeus. So you wonder if his brother was a disciple, which would have kind of gone in line with him there. But
there could have been a little friction there.
Right.
One I'm working with the IRS crowd, and the other one.
Well, one guy said that I read, he said he thought that he would have been known as Levi, except that once he was kind of excommunicated probably from his family when he became a tax collector, that's when the name changed. But what's interesting, it changed to gift of God, which is, like, to your point, that's an interesting name change.
Not really a taxable thing, There it is. There's nothing you can do to earn, because that's the way he'd been living his life. He had worked his way up the corrupt ladder of being a publican. And so, kind of like our politicians today, right. You do whatever
Jesus basically told Matthew, your numbers are not adding up to what they should, but mine will.
Right.
Well, it shows you, though, I think, what they did on The Chosen was because I think if you think about it, where it said, I think they got it from that statement. It's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick.
Right.
Now, he was more thinking about the spiritual condition, but that might have contributed. He might have had some kind of social disorder. Who embraces that against his own people? Somebody probably with some social issues. I like the idea that they
Plus, they should tell
road.
Everybody that are members of the kingdom, which Matthew gets into. It should let you know, Al, that some people who are downright freaky, but they're welcome into the kingdom.
Yeah,
because you have a bunch of illiterates running with this financial wizard, and you say just to get along, the classes are so profound between illiterate fishermen, and they see this guy that's been going out there to check taxing them.
Right.
Peter and them,
Which I think the Chosen's done a nice job of that to show that tension.
I mean, everybody had been bitten somewhat by Matthew.
But what you got to remember?
Hang on, Jess. Let's take another break.
Part of his character is revealed when he dropped all his buddies to go follow Jesus.
Well, it's pretty amazing.
He dropped them like a ton of bricks like that.
And walked away from his wealth.
Of course, the old Roman in Chosen, he was like, "You going to do what?"
That's right.
He's like, "Give it all up for what?"
Yeah.
But Matthew, somehow, it was the
gift of God. Now we're getting into why I was saying,
Well, I think he's sort of like the first early version of Paul in the group, because Paul come along, he was highly educated, he had all this, but that was kind of Matthew's role because of this book. I mean, because he expounds a lot here. In fact, the guy that does, there's a guy that does the Chosen, like it's called 6 Things You Probably Didn't Know About Matthew. If you Google that, I thought it was really interesting. I sent it to y'all. And it was, to your point, it said he had to be fluent in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic just to do his job.
That's a brain right there.
I mean, if he's mastered 4 languages, he's a pretty sharp guy. And then basically he built all this stuff for the Romans.
Plus, you needed someone. I'm glad, that the Peters of the world and the fisherman part. I as a redneck, I'm self-imposed redneck, but I said, I appreciate
river rat.
I appreciate that God would be so generous toward people who were not brains. This is for everybody. I think one of the reasons Matthew's in there is that, by the way, in that group that's the money men, they can be saved too.
Well,
I picked them too.
But isn't that interesting, Dad? That like
you said, Jace, the gift. The gift is wide.
But then Moses was an outcast. I mean, not Moses. Matthew was an outcast because he was smart and connected. So that does make it interesting when you think about Christianity. It really is available for everybody.
It's for everybody.
And so
it's hard for rich men to make it according to Jesus. So hard. Like putting a camel through the eye of a needle. Well, if it's that difficult and the money was the issue, in this case. Well, he dropped what he was doing and said, okay.
The rich young ruler didn't, but he did.
That's right.
But the calling of Matthew gave the caveat, it's available to everybody as long as you're acknowledging yourself as a sinner. I mean, the point that gets lost in him calling Matthew, even though he was probably weird as a follower for all the reasons we said, I just don't think it's an accident that he brings up. And I probably think this party at Matthew's house probably wasn't like imminent. This was probably just something he included. I mean, it just seems kind of weird that all of a sudden they're going to the house where when did he?
Well, he would have had the means to throw a party.
He could have, and it's not relevant to what I'm saying, but it seems Jesus made a point about saying it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. And he said in Matthew's account, but go learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. I mean, to me, the more important point were these Pharisees who were looking at Jesus and who he was choosing and criticizing him. Well, they were the ones that were more impossible to be saved. Because they see no need for
much
Jesus.
harder.
But to your point in the last podcast, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So when he says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, he's going back for thousands of Jewish history and all those sacrifices that went up. He said, look, that's not what saves you. Mercy is what saves you. My mercy to you. And so I think it was really interesting that you're right, Jace. He aimed at these Pharisees because they're looking at all these tax collectors. Moses, I keep saying Moses. Matthew, the reason he wanted to bring these guys in, I think he wanted his people he knew, his circle, to meet Jesus. But, it doesn't say any of them turned it around, but they were there.
I think somewhere it does, maybe.
Maybe so.
I'll have to look that up, but I think there's somewhere where it's implied. Maybe I read that somewhere. I don't know.
But I think it was like any of us, if you found something great, the first people you'd want to know about it is the people who you were around the most, whether it's your family or your friends or whatever. And that seems to be what Matthew did here.
Yeah. Paul told Titus, when the kindness and love of God our Savior appeared, he saved us, not because of righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy.
Right.
Then he told him, in which Matthew, it's implemented in Matthew, or he was, he said, because of his mercy, he saved us through the washing of rebirth and renewal by the Holy Spirit who was poured out on us generally through Jesus.
Right.
So that was the overall point. And Paul writes about it in the epistles. You read about what Matthew wrote down, and it all agrees.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm just guessing, but I think for Matthew, it was first a reconnect to his Jewishness.
Yep.
In Jesus. And then obviously once he started following Jesus, he realized that now we got to make another shift because it's bigger than that. So that's why,
Gentiles never even participated in the animal sacrifices as far as to God and all that, like the Jews had.
Right.
But you just think about what a gap that was to bring all of them together through one sacrifice.
That's right.
Jesus. And Matthew, he got it.
Yeah.
I know where I got that from, Al. In Luke's version of the calling of Matthew/Levi, he says in Matthew 5:27, it said, after this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his tax booth. Same story. Follow me, Jesus said to him. And Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Then Levi, this is the added little bonus here, had a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with him. So
he's got them all together.
Well, but here it was. I knew I'd read that somewhere that it was like he did this he threw a Jesus party.
He did,
and he invited all his friends. Well, you're assuming maybe some of them, but they were least interested, or why would they come?
It could have been the last blowout too, because he's fixing to be he's walking away from the money, So he had the last big blowout. But I think he wanted them to meet Jesus. I mean,
I agree.
Obviously, he had a moment.
So he was doing his job early.
That's right.
He
I
knew
took that as a good sign.
Yeah, I agree. Let's take
think about that. Brought him some name calling and rebuke too. Well, some of them that showed up at that wedding. I mean, at the big party. Some of them were there just saying, "All right, we'll go over and see what's going on."
No different than any of us.
Huh?
When you come to Jesus, I'll guarantee you something. There's going to be a large amount of people who think you're now a weirdo.
Oh, what are you talking about? I received that like a gale force wind. What are you? What are you doing? Oh, one of them said, "Oh my goodness, it's a religious kick."
Yeah.
I said, "I think it's more than that."
Yeah,
because I was just trying to tell them it's over between me and you.
I had that conversation, with my buddies. I mean, it took a while for me to have enough courage to do it,
but a bunch of brainy bean counters, money handlers, I would have hated to even be in that mix. I mean, you talk about rough.
They thought he was having a complete nervous breakdown.
They said he's gone nuts.
Oh, yeah.
Which maybe that's why they come up with.
I mean, the job you had, the money you were making, and you're going to give it all up. And you're wanting us to follow you?
You know what's interesting?
Are you crazy?
But you know what's interesting is so you get the 12 together.
Money's a powerful thing.
And there's a lot of tension there because we read about some of it, but some are wanting to be next to Jesus, and James and John got their mom to come and make a play for them.
On the right and the left.
Right. But Matthew, wouldn't you would think that Jesus would have put him in charge of the purse, but he didn't. Judas had the purse.
That's interesting.
That's an interest. I mean, I don't know what it means, but you'd think the guy that was the money handler that speaks the 4 languages would have been the guy. It's almost like, You
would have thought Matthew was in line for the betrayal, but no.
But I don't think they would have. I think that's why he was doing some shady stuff. That's probably why he was eliminated.
You think so? But we know that Judas was skimming because some of the...
That's the way life is, though. Whoever you think by human judgments, you think, you're usually wrong.
That's right.
It's the guy you're never thinking. Yeah. I like it how they did it on The Chosen with Judas.
Yeah.
I've
seen him grow in the faith and go way beyond my wildest expectations. I said, that old boy, he got it.
Yeah.
But it was 30 years later after their conversion. I just watched them and I'm like, man, I said, all he went through there, all waded through when he turned to Jesus. His buddies were after him. What are you doing? Yeah.
And obviously we knew that Judas never did. I love John's little commentaries about him. He's like, he would gripe about, these people, pouring the perfume on Jesus and all this, but it's like, but he helped himself to the bag. It's like, John was like, it was inside they knew, that
he was right in that in retrospect. But
right.
He just couldn't help. He couldn't make a sentence about Judas without saying something nasty.
That's right.
I mean, in a good way.
Once he had been proved to what he did.
He's like, this guy.
Of course, obviously they didn't know. That's a good point, Jace, because at the table, when Jesus says one of you's going to betray me, they're looking around and Peter's looking at John like, find out who it is. Like they have no idea.
You're not. We just put ourselves in these shells where we think we can see this, but you don't know. I've been so wrong on so many people that finally I got it. I thought, I'm staying away from predicting the outcome of people's hearts coming to Jesus.
I'm telling you.
I'll tell you, as a general rule, most of the worst people I've ever met turn out to be the greatest disciples of Jesus.
That's right.
So I'm done with that because you just don't know.
Right.
And a lot of the people that I thought, man, this guy's a minister or he's in the ministry and he's on fire for Jesus. Then you look up 5 years down the road and he's having an affair. He left his wife. What happened? How could you not see
It's like our guy, Dad, that we met, Ravi Zacharias, which he's dead now. But, he's one of the greatest Christian apologists ever and impacted me in huge ways spiritually. I used to listen to his sermons when I was driving to preach, and it impacted how I preached. And he dies, and then it comes out after he died that he had this whole thing with sex problem with massage people all around the world, and it all came out. And it was really, a lot of people were just like, well, now everything he said, I can't, he had no impact because it turns out he had a bad sin problem going on. But I viewed it differently. I thought, I never knew that about him, but although I know anybody's capable of anything, but the spiritual truths that he was espousing impacted me.
Yep.
And so you can't really take that away, even if he did have a terrible sin problem. So, but a lot of people are just like, I'm done with I can't even talk about him anymore. And I understand why. I'm not saying they're wrong.
I think the disciples in our context they were more sinful than we're realizing. They're human beings. We're all sinful.
Yeah.
Now, I think immediately once Jesus called them and they started following him a little bit, just like what we do when we come to Jesus, things get way better in a hurry. So I think that probably happened.
Yeah.
But you got to think, you're talking about some baggage. How does he need to portray it to give you this guy was running around with people that the culture by and large hated.
That's right.
A bunch of shysters. And forget the social disorders. He's probably so arrogant, the power of his position. It's just not a person you want to hang out with. So I'm sure that there were quite the bit of arguments those first few days of following Jesus.
Well, you also had
who invited this guy? Well, that's why The Chosen has been such a good show.
Right.
Because they just took a little bit of that, read just like we did. We came up with the same conclusions,
right,
and they put it on TV.
Yeah, made
and
a
you're
show
like,
about it.
oh, yeah, okay.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And one of them was a zealot, which we know those guys. You follow the zealots back through Jewish history, not necessarily in the Bible, but just Jewish history, Josephus. These guys, they're Taliban-esque,
They cut you just to watch you bleed.
These. That old boy, he came out of that world. So you're right, Jason. You look at it as a group. Eclectic is not near a big enough a word to describe that group.
And you got a bunch of fishermen. Throw that in there.
4 of them. Yeah.
You talking about a ragtag bunch. And look, and they all came.
Where's the text that says it takes many kinds or something to make up the kingdom of God?
Right.
Something to that effect.
Well, you take into effect that John the Baptist announced all this.
Yeah.
Well, he just crazy man.
Yeah.
Wearing animal skins.
Eating
I guarantee you, anybody who saw him coming, the heat waves coming up off the desert, and here's somebody running down grasshoppers and robbing beehives to make a living to eat, and he comes up out of the nowhere hollering, "You bunch of snakes." Well, you'd think anybody that saw him, but amazingly, thousands were being baptized by him.
One of my favorite memories at West Monroe, we used to do dramas a lot, and we'd do them on like a whole weekend, and we'd do the last one on Sunday morning. We did one where Dad was John the Baptist.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember doing that. So they had him in this,
barely, yeah, but
they had him in his animal skin. He had a staff, and he just comes walking down the center aisle at WFR unannounced, because nobody knows what's going to happen.
I saw people get afraid.
Oh, and then he had memorized that whole thing. He's like, "Oh, you brood of a-" He's just yelling and screaming, and people are like covering their kids. But it was a moment, Dad. I mean, you nailed it. It was like it was very powerful.
Yeah,
I'll never forget it. That was probably 30 years ago.
Well, that's 30 years ago when I was young in the faith. So looking back on it, I'm like, well.
You had the look.
The reason we should go down through these books and look at what they did and how they were, and looking at these parties where Jesus was at, because then you fast forward today and you see some of the things that churches argue about and things the rules they have, and you're reading this and you're like, I think you missed something here.
I think you missed a point.
We're marrying the homeless in my yard amidst a dog fight.
Yeah, that's good. Because that goes a lot. That's a lot closer to what I'm seeing here than having a church where two homeless people walk up and they're saying, "We'll get married," and you're like, maybe y'all just don't belong.
By the way, the average wedding cost, I looked it up after you told that story on the last podcast, is about $35,000. That's average, so that means there's a lot more.
This was we had a little.
You think you pull that off for $35K?
Well, Phil, you got married for $35.
Yeah, this was all free on my part, but
I'm talking about you when you married.
Actually,
Kay.
We gave the groom and his newfound wife. We paid them to have a place to have their honeymoon because they're homeless.
That's right.
So
I was saying when you married Kay, how much did that cost?
How much that cost you? Just
$25.
Oh, 25.
$25.
Oh, wow.
$10 on the blood test to see if you're carrying some communicable disease.
Micro.
So they go from the blood test.
Good.
I said, who's, you got to preach around or something? They said, we'll go down there and justice of the peace.
Yeah.
He charged $15. The wedding ceremony lasted about 10 seconds, maybe. "Do you want our son?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, she's yours. Sign right here."
So romantic.
I said, "Miss Kay, you got any money on your head?" I said, "How much is it?"
And she paid for it.
Yeah, I was looking for the $15. He said $15. I said, "Woo." I reached in my pocket. I didn't have $15. Miss Kay said, "Oh, I've got it here."
It was in Oklahoma.
Yeah. It was a short wedding.
All right.
All right, we're done.
It was worth every dime, I'll tell you that. A lot cheaper to get in than one of them to get out of it, I'll tell you that.
It's cheaper to keep her. Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.